Hello, welcome to the Outside Fence Preview Show. We're coming up to day 4 of the Flemington Cup Carnival. It's been a long week, it's been a big week. I'm your host Tristan Heffernan, joined as always by Stewart Bowles-Brown. We've seen the Oaks today where the Hot Pot Montefiore has gone under. How's the day treating you, the week treating you, Bowles? And do we go into Saturday exhausted, or we still got a bit of a pep in the step trying to finish off the week well?
No, definitely still got a bit of pep in the step, as I don't mind the look of Saturday's card. But today wasn't a great day on the punt, but still got the nose in front for the week, and hopefully not too many people followed me in the Oaks where I got it a bit wrong.
I don't think you're alone. Well, I got it wrong with you, but that's racing. We can get races wrong. That's going to happen. We got to bounce back and just stick to doing the work, and things turn around. We're going to do 2 races on tonight's preview show. We're going to do the Darley Sprint Classic, and we're going to do the Mackinnon Stakes, the 2 Group 1 races on the card. First of all, we're going to talk about the track. There was a little bit of juice in the track today with some unexpected overnight rain that your friends at Bomb didn't really see coming. That resulted in a soft 5 track, and we've started to see horses get away from the inside. What do you think we've got in store for us on Saturday?
Yeah, Saturday I'd expect probably to be back in the good range. There's sort of a tiny bit of rain forecast sort of around the next couple of days, but nothing really too substantial. And given how well Flemington tends to dry out, and I think it got back to good at some stage today as well. So I'd expect it to be in the good 3 or 4 range. As you said, they sort of started to edge away from the fence a bit today. I'd probably expect that to continue. They actually, the last time I looked, they don't have the rail position yet, but it probably moves out sort of another 2 or 3 metres from today. So I'd expect them to sort of edge away from the fence in the circle races, and in the straight races come down towards, I suppose, the outside half of the track towards the outside fence there, like I suppose they did in that last race today. Now, as far as any wind goes, there seems to be a bit of a southerly wind that's been hanging around all week at Flemington. So, as was mentioned before, that's a bit of a tailwind around the sweeping home turn. And also, it can be a bit of a headwind for the straight races as well. But you tend to think that would affect horses that don't get cover in those straight races. But it seems as though the leaders and even horses racing without cover in the straight races have been able to run well and even win this week with that wind around. So it doesn't seem to have a massive bearing on those races.
Okay, we're going to get a pretty fair deck by the sound of things there. Let's jump straight into the Darley Classic, and I'll bring up the market. A few different form lines we've got here that we're going to go through. Did anything surprise you on the market at first glance?
Not a huge amount. As you can see, it's a fairly open race. There aren't really too many horses I'd say you could totally put the pen through as winning chances. Maybe it wouldn't shock me if come race time if Nature Strip started favourite over Bivouac, just given I suppose the support that horse tends to get, and given his great record down the straight, which included a win in this race last year. So maybe Nature Strip taking over favouritism, but I'm not too shocked about the prices of most of those.
Beauty. Let's move on to the speed map. Obviously, they can take up some different spots as we go down the straight, but this is a little bit different to what we've seen so far from Nature Strip in Sydney. He's only really got the one horse that's likely to provide any real pressure on him in the lead. Is that fair to say there in Fabergino?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Obviously, Haydock can sort of get right on speed if it wants, but I'd say it wouldn't be fast enough to sort of keep up with the likes of Nature Strip and Fabergino. I'd expect most straight races, they tend to not go too hard, so I'd expect Nature Strip to pretty much control the speed here with Fabergino sitting up outside him. I doubt it would be her up outside Fabergino sit outside Nature Strip. I wouldn't think it would be in her best interest to really serve it up to Nature Strip. Just I suppose sit outside there, and both of them are trying to control the speed. I suppose a horse like Standout could settle a bit closer. It's drawn sort of just inside the 2 leaders there, so may look to get directly on the back of them after jumping. And I suppose the big thing to note in this race is that those 2 leaders are drawn the outside 2 gates, so they're very much going to control the race towards that outside fence.
Yeah, so Fabergino, we've sort of thought her as being a bit of a speedster, but the 2 runs she's had so far in Melbourne this time in, she obviously wasn't great away there in the Moya Stakes, and then she was quite happy just to take the sit there in the Caulfield Sprint, but going to 1,200 metres now, that not a renowned 1,200 metre horse, they might be looking to keep as much energy as possible to try and run the trip.
Yeah, that possibly could happen, and I suppose Nature Strip being in the race can sort of bluff a few connections into sort of thinking, okay, there's the leader, and if we sort of go with it, it'll be detrimental to our chances. So yeah, I'd expect it to just sit off Nature Strip.
Okay, cool. Just those ones back in the field. We've got Bivouac. Now we know that Bivouac's won down the straight, sitting hard on the speed before, but he doesn't seem to have the early speed this preparation. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, he sort of raced off the speed in both runs this prep. Obviously, he was in the Everest last start where they went really hard, so it was more a judgment ride by Glenn Boss, more so than position him sort of close to the speed. He could possibly be closer than he is on the map there. It's just the way it sort of worked out that I thought Standout would be ridden a bit more aggressively given where it's drawn, and I just had Bivouac slotting in on the back of him.
Yeah, he ran so well last time that wouldn't be surprised if they ride him with a bit of cover again. We're going to go through 4 races here to look over the Darley Sprint Classic. First of all, well, there's the market again. I'm going to jump into the Everest instead here. We've got, obviously, we've just talked about Nature Strip. He's up there in second in the Everest. And we've also got Bivouac back in the field in the blue. We've got Santa Ana Lane, who's right out the back in the blue and yellow. Libertini in the blue and the white back there sort of with Bivouac, and Tofane as well back in the field as well. Note that she was wearing the Yulong green and white colours. So let's run the tape here. It makes sense to talk about Nature Strip first because you mentioned that you think he might start favourite. He won this race last year, but in all honesty, his Sydney preparation has been a little bit disappointing.
Yeah, it has on paper. He hasn't had a huge amount go right. He's just had sort of a few issues here and there. He had those issues with the barriers. Now in the Everest here, he got led by Eduardo, and they've obviously gone very fast in this. So it sort of ideally suits him to get control in his races. So that sort of didn't help his chances. I still thought he ran okay considering he wasn't beaten too far and just sort of got a bit tired late. Obviously, G-Tra and Horbury on Her have both come out of this race since and ran last week in the Yes Stakes in Sydney, and both ran 1-2 in that. So it sort of shows, I suppose, the form out of the Everest looks quite good. And I suppose a little worry out of the Everest could have been that horses were flattened by this fast tempo, and it was obviously a bit of a grand final for all these horses. So it sort of shows, I suppose, that horses have been able to rebound out of the race. So I'm not too worried about sort of Nature Strip coming off a perceived hard run in this race, and he gets back down the straight, which he loves. Obviously won this race last year, as we mentioned. So yeah, he's right in the frame as a winning chance.
Okay, do you think he needs the track to have a bit of sting out of it?
Not necessarily. I don't think it's sort of paramount to his winning chances. I think on a good track, he still sort of he can still run well. I suppose the biggest factor might be for Nature Strip or the biggest 2 factors for Nature Strip outside of sort of is he actually in the same form as he was this time last year, will be if there's any significant headwind down the straight, and then also, as you mentioned, how much pressure will Fabergino want to serve up to him. If the wind is fairly benign and Fabergino wants to sit off him, then obviously he's a great chance.
Do you make anything of the new rider? He's getting Hugh Bowman on now to replace the suspended James McDonald.
Yeah, I'd make a little bit of it. Obviously, Hugh Bowman's a quality jockey, but Nature Strip, I suppose, is a bit of a quirky horse. You sort of need... He's a sort of horse you'd probably like to have a sit on in, say, a trial or even track work before riding him in a race. You sort of don't want to strangle him and you sort of want to let him do his own thing. So, obviously, Bowman's an experienced rider. He rides front run as well, generally. So, it's a Group 1 race as well. So, it'd be nice and focused. So, yeah, I'd be surprised if it makes too much of a difference. But, yeah, it's probably not massively ideal.
Okay. Let's move on to Bivouac, who was the first horse of these ones home in the Everest. And, well, we were both potting him somewhat going into the Everest. A lot of talk of Bivouac's best performances coming in slowly run races, but this performance really blew that theory out of the water.
Yeah, it did. He was excellent in this race. He had to ease off heels early in the race too and got a little bit keen as well. But, he finished off pretty much as well as anything in the race here. Now, coming to Flemington will be no issue for him. He's had 2 runs down the straight where he won the Newmarket and he ran second in a Coolmore, so he obviously loves the straight. We saw he should map fairly well, sort of just off that sort of leading pack as well. Glenn Boss retains the ride, and we all know he lifts for Group 1 races, so he's another horse who, you can make a great case for winning the race.
Yeah, now... And we see inside him, Guitra ran on strongly there, and you mentioned he came out and won last week. The horse that got home probably as strong as anything there is the old boy Santa and Elaine. He showed he's still got a bit of life in the old legs there, Bowles, and he does generally race all right down the straight.
Yeah, so he ran the best last 200 of this Everest and the third fastest of the meeting. So he charged home off that fast tempo. He does like the straight. He obviously won this race 2 years ago. His first up run down the straight over the 1200 was only fair at best. Usually he does take a run, but the stable did indicate before that race that he was more forward than he usually is. So that's some little worry. Obviously, he would have loved the fast tempo here of the Everest. He's not going to he's highly unlikely to get that on Saturday in the Darley Classic. So that's got to be a little query. But yeah, he's a horse I still want to go around until I sort of see him right back to form.
Okay. Finishing just behind him was Libertini. Now, you were against Libertini heading towards the Everest despite her impressive win in the lead-up. She seemed like she had every chance compared to a horse like Bivouac and couldn't match him in the run home. Do you think it's going to play out in similar fashion on Saturday?
Yeah, so she was wide here in the Everest, so she ran okay and probably does have a bit of an excuse. But I was a bit against her because of the map, and also I thought her first up win in Sydney was sort of put on for her a bit. A horse like she beat Classic Legend, who easily turned the tables here, but he was a far superior run in that lead up. All her wins have come on dry ground, so that's a massive key to her chances. So she's likely to get that on Saturday. She was placed in a Coolmore last spring down the straight. She was only fair in a Newmarket down the straight. And I suppose the interesting thing with Libertini is she has raced Bivouac 4 times and she's yet to beat him home. So that's sort of a fairly decent sample size that Bivouac sort of does have the ascendancy over Libertini. So I'd be happy to say that on Saturday, Bivouac will make that 5 times. So, Libertini for me is probably a place chance at best.
Okay, and the final runner coming through the Everest here is Tofane, which you gave us a little bit of a push for weeks out of the Everest. I think her chances here were cruelled a little bit by the barrier and she ended up getting a fair way back, but that said, she didn't run on quite as well as the others. Do you think maybe that this level has maybe caught her out a bit at 1,200 metres, Tofane, or is there a reason we can see her improve here back to Flemington?
Yeah, I definitely think she can improve back to Flemington. As you say, like a really fast run 1,200 at this level was probably a bit too fast for her, and she probably got run off her feet a bit and can't sprint home in those sectionals that I suppose horses like Bivouac and Santa Ana Lane can off those fast tempos. So, I'm prepared to sort of half forgive this run, given the sort of race probably didn't set up totally to her liking. The start prior in the Gilgai down the straight over 1200, so the same track and distance, you could make a very good argument that she should have won that race after being held up till late in the race. So the straight holds no fears for her. So she's probably an outside chance in the race more than anything. Probably running a place, probably her best chance, but I wouldn't totally fall off my chair if she won.
Okay, that's a really nice segue to go and look at the Gilgai Stakes now, where Tofane came through before running in the Everest. So the tower always gets me on these Flemington Straight races, and there's the 600 metre mark. I'll let it run a little bit further. Let's look at the Gilgai, because this is the last lead-up race for Zoutori, who's the eventual winner in the white and red. White with the red stripes, but we do have Tofane on its back and Santa Ana Lane out the back to keep an eye on as well. So we've talked about those latter two. So let's discuss Zoutori as we run the tape back. Obviously a very, very good straight horse, but still yet to totally prove himself at this level.
Yeah, definitely. This is the next step up for him. Weight for age Group 1 against the likes of the horses like Nature Strip and Bivouac. So, that's a big test for him. As you mentioned, he's got a great record down the straight over the 1200. Both his wins this prep have been over that track and distance. I was fairly impressed with his win, given they went at a fast tempo and he didn't get cover for the whole race, which is a bit unusual for him, and he was sort of racing in between horses for most of the straight and was still fairly strong through the line. So that was a fairly impressive win. Obviously, Tofane, as we mentioned, was quite unlucky in the race, so could have made a case that she should have won the race. Kemmel Pass has finished close up there, who actually won down the straight on Derby Day as well. So I suppose there's a little bit of form out of this race, but to me, this is sort of a level or two below what they'll be meeting on Saturday. And so, to me, Zoutori, an outside winning chance, but more realistically, probably a place chance. I suppose his best hope will be that this is probably a bit of a target race for him, whereas a lot of those horses coming through the Everest have already had their grand final, and now this is maybe an afterthought.
Yeah, okay, let's line up Zoutori. Do you think he's improved in the last 12 months? Because this time last year, he was already building a bit of a reputation as a straight track horse. He won the Bobby Lewis. He was placed in the Gilgai behind Sunlight and Santa Ana Lane. He was also placed in the Tab Stakes on Derby Day before he went into this race last year, and he was outclassed thoroughly by Nature Strip. Is this a similar path he's on, or do you think possibly he's improved at all?
He's probably improved a little bit. Like, he ran well in an Oakley Plate in the autumn. The little thing with Zoutori as well, I think a lot of his best runs are sort of on the fresh side. So he's had a bit of a gap between runs here, so he comes into it a bit fresh. He's had a jump out since this race, and he went okay, nothing special really. He was only given a quiet time. He's going to get every chance to perform on Saturday. He'll get firm ground, which he likes. Obviously, he likes a straight, as we mentioned as well. So, barring bad luck in running, it's hard to say Zoutori would have an excuse on Saturday.
Okay. We've mentioned the other two. Let's go across now and have a look at the Manikato. We've got the winner of that race, Haydock, coming through here. Obviously, we'll just pause it there. He's there in the white with the orange and blue stripes. Now, obviously, Haydock is a very good Moonee Valley horse, having won that race twice. The stable had talked up as that being his target race. How's the setup now going down the straight? We know he's won at Flemington before over the mile when he won the Guineas. What are your thoughts on him back to the 1,200 metre trip here?
Yeah, I definitely think the straight's a bit of a query for him. He has won down the straight, but was in a pretty weak Ori Star a few years ago, and then his most recent run down the straight was poor. this race sort of set up fairly well for him. Obviously, I wasn't that keen on him in this race, and he's a horse, as I mentioned on a previous show, that I've found very hard to catch throughout his career. So once again, I'm going to risk him in this race. I think this is a bit of a step up for him, and yeah, I just don't think he's that suited down the straight, and he's meeting horses who are sort of track specialists, and the straight really is sort of a specialist sort of course. So I'm going to risk him in this race. He sets up to map pretty well. Possibly just behind the leaders there, so he'll get every chance. But I just don't quite think he's good enough in a sort of a 1,200 metre Group 1 down the straight.
Okay, to play devil's advocate here, we know he ran a track record here. I'm not going to dive too much into that because the track was absolutely on fire at Moonee Valley this night, so you'd almost expect the Group 1 winner to run a track record or close to it. The second horse there is Trekking, who we saw finished alongside Gytrash in the Everest, wasn't far behind Bivouac. You're not keen to take that form line through?
No, I'm not. Obviously, that's an angle that you definitely can, or a line that you can draw if you wanted to make a case for Haydock. I'm more, I suppose, going off Haydock's career as a whole and sort of how I've rated the horse through many of its runs in its career. And yeah, it's not really a horse I want to find in a Group 1 down the straight. So if this race was at Moonee Valley with a similar kind of setup where he's probably going to sit behind the leaders, then yeah, I'd probably have to give him a great chance off this win. But I just think Flemington down the straight's a whole different kettle of fish.
All right, beautiful. Let's move on now to our last race to review. This was the Caulfield Sprint, which is won by, a comeback horse of some description in Graff. Now, he said it was back in the Australian bloodstock colours here. The other horse to make note of is Fabergino. It's hard to miss him. He's the grey up there in third spot. Now, this was over 1,000 metres, so both these horses go to 1,200. Let's start with Graff Balls. This horse has been a bit of an enigma throughout his career. Do you think they've maybe got him going, and can he finally deliver on the stack of potential that he's shown throughout his career?
Yeah, well, this was his first start for Danny O'Brien. It's already a big tick for Danny O'Brien getting the horse back in the winners list. As you can see, he settled back here. It was nice and quiet. They actually didn't go too hard in this race, particularly for a 1,000 metre race. So he sort of was able to tack on the back there and actually ran some very good sectionals at the end of the race. It was pretty much the best sectionals of the meeting, bar the sort of farcical Tristan Stakes that was run later in the meeting, where all horses ran sort of the top 7 or 8 sectionals, the late sectionals of the race. But yeah, that was one of the better performances of the day. He has run well down the straight before without sort of finishing in the placings in a Newmarket and even a Lightning, so the straight isn't too foreign to him. And obviously Danny O'Brien generally has a good record down the straight with his horses. Gate 1 has to be a bit of a query for him. I'm assuming he'll just sort of flop out of the gates and come over back behind all the horses and settle near the rear and sort of try and weave his way through like that. But yeah, he's a horse I'm prepared to risk on Saturday, obviously going up in class and also, possibly having to come from last and having a sort of a tricky map to navigate.
Okay, do you think the weight for age conditions are against him here? I noticed he did run 4th in a Newmarket, beaten just over a length by Sunlight, but that was earlier in his career. He was in with the 51 kilos. He's really yet to stamp himself in this grade, isn't he?
Yeah, well, obviously, if this was a handicap, then he'd be receiving a fair bit of weight off horses like Bivouac and Nature Strip, and even obviously Sandra Adelaine as well. So, if you're into your weights and your ratings that way, then obviously it's hard to make a case for Graff.
Okay, and Fabergino, were you surprised that she took the sit like she did there at Caulfield? And I did sort of mention the 1,200 not being charted territory for her. She's usually kept to the shorter trips. So does that hold major concerns for you like it does for me?
Yeah, it probably does. as you say, she was ridden a bit conservative here. Obviously, they probably went into the race thinking, well, we can't cross Alpha Oro. There's no point gassing us. There's only one turn as well, so we can sort of sit 3 wide and not carry too much of a penalty for it. But as I mentioned, sort of, I suppose similar with Graff, this race on Saturday is a significant step up from this race at Caulfield. Obviously, has to go to 1200 for the first time. Sort of hasn't powered through the line at a lot of her wins at those shorter distances as well. So 1200 is definitely a query. And then obviously is faced with probably sitting outside Nature Strip as well, which wouldn't be an easy task. So, yeah, I think it's very much an outsider in Saturday's race.
Okay, you did correct me on Thursday. I'll get you one back here. She has had to go at 1200 metres. She was odds on. She ran last over there in WA. So, yeah, it serves your point well. I think the 1200 is definitely a query there. We've almost been through the whole field. There's one left to talk about. He's the outside of the field standout. Does he make any sort of impact on this race at all?
I wouldn't be like. I think he's some tiny little chance. Given he was very unlucky last start, arguably should have won the Sydney Stakes, which is pretty much the Everest consolation. Wasn't the strongest race I've ever seen, and obviously this is a significant step up. But as I mentioned with the map there, I think he draws to almost map best in the race out of a lot of horses. He can probably sit on the back of the speed and sort of have first option at those leaders. And off the right run on firm ground, Standout's got a pretty sharp sectional in him, but he obviously needs a lot of things to go his way to sort of be in the finish here. But, on his day, he can be a quite brilliant horse.
Okay. Not really finding many to put the pin through in this race here, Balls. I'm going to bring up the tips. You've given us complete duck eggs here. Explain yourself.
Yeah, well, I've been through this race back to front, and I'm finding it very hard, or have found it near impossible to find a bet at this stage. And to be honest, I'm not quite sure whether that's even going to change come Saturday. Obviously, I suppose things like track bias and even market moves could influence me betting in the race. But yeah, there's not too many runners I can put the pens through and say I wouldn't, like, under no circumstances I'd be interested in backing. Probably Fabergino is one, but sort of apart from that, I could probably make some sort of case for the rest of the field. Okay,
so you're still saying you've got a decent handle on the field, but the market is pretty much correct at this stage, to your eye?
Yeah, I would say that. As I said at the start, I was a little bit surprised Nature Strip wasn't favourite, just purely because I suppose the following the horse has got, and generally his career of short SPs come into it. Forced to give a top tip on the race, I'd say probably Bivouac's probably the most reliable horse in the race. As far as I reckon, I'd be very surprised if he's not sort of in the finish there somewhere. But Nature Strip's the horse who could blow them away without surprising.
Okay, that sort of leads me into mine. I'm not super keen to bet, but I will be keeping an eye on Nature Strip. I think he's going to be worth rolling the dice on if he goes the other way. If he comes into favouritism, he's not really a horse I want to be with, because there are still question marks on how he's going. But just the fact that if the real Nature Strip turns up, he gets a beautiful setup for the race, in my opinion, with only Fabergino potentially stand out, but I think he's going to get every chance to control the race. I don't think the booking of Bowman's any great negative. I think he's got great hands, Bowman, so his Nature Strip's probably going to really appreciate his soft touch. And yeah, if we can, I'm sort of thinking around that $5 mark, I'd probably be looking to have something on Nature Strip straight out. The other one I'm sort of interested in is Tofane. I'm quite happy to just forgive her that Everest run. She does race very well down the straight. I could just see the market maybe going totally against her off that Everest run. So if she got out to really big odds, I would be tempted to have a little sneaky on her Tofane. But at this stage, I still want to see a bit of a drift in the market on both to get involved. With that said, let's move on to our second race to preview. That is the Mackinnon Stakes, 2,000 metres. We've got the market up here, Balls. Arcadia Queen, the favourite, to turn the tables on Mugatoo from their Cox Plate runs. And then we've got the New Zealander Melody Belle returning to Australia after a couple of wins there in New Zealand. Anything surprise you at first glance here?
I'm a little bit surprised that Mr. Quickie's as short as he is, even at sort of $10 or $11. I couldn't possibly have him at that price. I thought he'd be at least double that. And also, I was pleasantly surprised about the price of Arcadia Queen. Without giving too much away, back on a dry track here, I thought she'd be a bit shorter.
Okay, let's bring up the speed map here. Didn't look to be too much tempo to my eye. I think you've probably come up with something similar. Shout the Bar looks like taking up the running. We know she's not adverse to stacking them up either from her Sydney runs, Shout the Bar. So it could be a messy race potentially, given this lack of obvious tempo.
Yeah, on paper, as you mentioned, there does look to be very little speed here. Shout the Bar looks the obvious leader from its outside gate. And then I'd expect horses such as Dallas and Harlem would use that inside gate. I'd expect Mr. Quickie's probably not far away as well. Mugatoo's an interesting horse. It's drawn a bit awkwardly there. I've got it slotting in, but there's probably some chance if they're not going too fast early that and they stay a bit bunched, it could get caught wide. So it may be one that has to sort of roll forward and might end up outside the leader. Other than that, sort of Arcadia Queen, you expect to settle back along with Melody Belle, and then I've got 50 Stars being ridden quiet as well.
Yeah, from the wide gate, I can see that. We're going to go through 4 races here on the lead-ups. First of all, let's kick it off with the Cox Plate, where we see Mugatoo out there wide on the track in the Australian bloodstock colours, the blue with the white and black checks, and just behind him there in the pink is Arcadia Queen. Let's start with Arcadia Queen, because you made the mention that you thought she would come up a bit shorter. Both were really good runs in the Cox Plate, and to start with, this looks an easier assignment. Is there any thoughts of this being an afterthought for both?
Yeah, I suppose it's some little worry that you'd assume this isn't the main target of the preparation. But I suppose you've got to take on trust that sort of both trainers know what they're doing, and both horses are still showing the aptitude to want to race this preparation. Arcadia Queen here, I thought was an excellent run. We don't see on this vision, but at around 1,000 metre mark, she got right on heels of the horse in front, and Willie Pike nearly came off. Recovered to not being beaten far in running fifth. The big thing here is this was on soft ground, and on Saturday she's likely to get back onto firm going, which we know through her Caulfield Stakes win, and I suppose other performances in her career that she loves. Now, we spoke about with the map there doesn't look to be huge speed in the race. To me, that's not a huge worry for Arcadia Queen. As we saw in the Caulfield Stakes, there wasn't much speed in that race either, but she ruled off some brilliant sectionals in that race, and really has that sharp turn of foot off a slow tempo on firm ground. And I think she can show that again on Saturday.
Are you at all worried that Willie Pike has gone home and now she's going to have a new rider on Saturday?
It's probably not massively ideal. Like, given an ideal scenario, I'd prefer, I suppose, Pike with her, as he obviously knows the mare well. Luke Curry goes on, who I've got full faith in as a rider. I'm not sure whether he's going to sit on her back before race day at all, but as I said, it's not totally ideal, but Curry's a good rider, so yeah, it's not the end of the world.
Okay, and you see here, Mugatoo finishes in front of Arcadia Queen here in the Cox Plate. Arcadia Queen had her excuses. Mugatoo did too. He was caught wide. He was very wide on the home turn, and he definitely ran better than the market expected. A couple of points there. He gets back to dry ground in this case. Do you think that's a negative for him at all? And you've already touched on the gate. Do you think he's capable of rolling forward if that's what they need to do to get in?
Yeah, as you mentioned, he was a great run here in the Cox Plate. He was 3 wide, no cover the trip, wobbled a bit round the home turn, and then obviously wasn't beaten far into fourth placing. This was on soft ground, which I think he definitely appreciates. He's not hopeless on firm going, but I'd say he's a better horse, particularly at this level, on soft going, and that's a big turnaround with it and Arcadia Queen for me. Yeah, he's still a winning chance in the race. I would be shocked if he did win. As I said, the map's a little bit of a query early, whether he can slot in somewhere. It's probably not ideal if he has to sit outside the leader, but that's probably worst case scenario for him. It's just, a tricky little gate there. But, as you see, he's beaten Arcadia Queen by about a half length there, and I expect her to turn the tables on Saturday.
Do you think there's a chance that they just snag at the start, Mugatoo, and take that sort of worry out of the equation and go back to last and then try and work things out from there?
Maybe there's some chance they do, but the horse is he's a bit of a strong going horse. He travels beautifully, as in sort of can almost pull himself into a race sometimes. So I just don't know if that would be in their best interest to really snag the horse and restrain it. But yeah, that's I suppose one option that I suppose Connections would get mull over.
Okay, we're going to go on to the Cantala. It seems pretty obvious, but are you happy to say that the Cox Plate's probably the best form leading into this race?
Yeah, I would say that.
Beautiful. Easy. Let's bring up the Cantala. We've got a number of runners coming through here. 2 actually. 50 Stars is back second last in the green cap there, in the Jerry Ryan colours. And we've also got Mr. Quickie, who I think is back there on the fence in the white and blue. Both are around the $10 mark here. Let's start with Mr. Quickie, because you've sort of come out all guns blazing and potted the Christ out of it when we've gone through the market. Give us your reasons behind not being in the corner of Mr. Quickie in this race.
Yep, so Mr. Quickie obviously won the Toorak when he was freshened up at Caulfield back to a mile. He settled on the fence, and that was very much a fence-dominated race, where all the place getters came through on the inside. The way the race shape was sort of suited those horses saving ground. He then went to this race here, settled a long way back, and just never really got into the race. I know the stable were talking about he just didn't turn up on the day and he wasn't trying and those sort of excuses, but it's probably not what you want to really hear. He now backs up 7 days later into the Mackinnon over 2,000. But he's a horse I'd prefer on the fresh side, and even up to sort of 2,000, I'd still prefer him on the fresh side. This feels like a massive afterthought to me. I think if he won last week, would they be backing up here? Maybe not. I'm a bit surprised he's around that $10 mark, and I'm very happy to take him on.
Okay, we know of him as he's a 2,400 metre winner of the Queensland Derby, but as time has gone on, he has continued to fail at the staying trips since then. So you're against it at the 2,000 metres as well?
Not massively. I still could see him winning a race over 2,000 metres, but I'm just not convinced the horse is sort of a Group 1 weight for age horse, to be honest. And I think he was just a bit flattered when he won the Toorak, and then obviously he's run poorly in the Cantala. So I'm just querying his form at the moment and how he's going this preparation.
Okay, the other horse we see ran on there and into a pretty solid fifth is 50 Stars. We go back into the autumn, and this horse won here at Group 1 level weight for age when he won the Australian Cup. The major issue I can see with 50 Stars is he tends to race better with a bit of sting out of the track, and he's unlikely to get that on Saturday. Do you think that is enough to really nix his winning chances here?
I think he's got a small winning chance here. As you said, he did win the Australian Cup in the autumn, and that was off a 7-day backup after winning over the mile at Flemington. So they're using the same formula here: 7-day backup from a mile run into the 2,000. He did win that Australian Cup on a good track. So as you said, I do agree that he goes better with a bit of juice in the track. But I don't think it's sort of the end of the world that the track's firm for him. He can still perform. So yeah, I think he's one of the winning chances in the race. And if he's around about the same price as Mr. Quickie, and I think he's a far better chance.
Might find ourselves a little head-to-head then. Balls 50 stars to beat home Mr. Quickie. If you can find one of those early, it sounds like a way to go, because they're probably not going to start similar prices from what you've been telling us there.
No, yeah, if I could find a head-to-head between the two, I'd be very happy to back 50 stars. And yeah, I couldn't see Mr. Quickie getting any shorter than it currently is. And I'd assume 50 stars would have his supporters, considering that pattern from the autumn where he was successful off the 7-day back up to 2,000. And he has run well in this race here. Nothing wrong with his run. He's got home well, and he's sort of racing like he's looking for the 2,000.
Yep. No, always good to see a horse trying to do something that they've already done before. Let's jump over the ditch now to New Zealand. We'll talk about Melody Belle, who is well in the market, third favourite. This is when she wins the Livermore Classic at her last start. This is 2,000 metres at weight for age, Group 1 level in New Zealand. I'm going to run it a bit further. You'll see she's in the orange colours. There's a few of them in the race. She's she's on the outside of the horse in the yellow, back about just worse than midfield. She's a dominant winner here. This follows a 1,600 metre Group 1 win at a start previous, which was a stark turnaround, considering that she went home basically with her tail between her legs after a pretty ordinary start to a preparation in Sydney. What do we make of Melody Belle here?
Yeah, she's obviously quite impressive in her two wins in New Zealand since going back there. You've obviously got to query the class of these races compared to what she meets in Australia. Those runs in Sydney have got to be a little query on sort of how she's going, and it's now sort of 7 runs in Australia since she has won. I suppose the positive for her is that she did run in this race last year, and you could make a very strong case that she should have won it. And it was definitely the best run in the race after getting a long way back. So if she can bring that form to Flemington on Saturday, she's obviously in with a good chance. I suppose the other thing as well, she's another horse who probably prefers a bit of sting out of the track, and is likely to get sort of a firm track on Saturday. So whilst not completely hopeless on a firm track, she obviously prefers a bit of juice in the track. So that's another thing that's probably sort of against her to a degree. So yeah, I'm not going to say she can't win, but yeah, she's not a horse I'm looking to find in this race.
Okay, initially I was really against her, given the poor start to her preparation there in Sydney, and even the last time we saw her in the autumn, she ran well without. Well, she was well in the market in the Futurity and the All-Star Mile and got beat there. Well in the market in the Doncaster. She continued to get beat. She was only ever beaten around a couple of lengths, so it's hard to really pot her completely. But I thought once she returned to New Zealand, maybe that was going to be the last we've seen of Melody Belle. As much as we say these races, well, this Livermore Classic's going to be probably far inferior to the Mackinnon we've got on Saturday. Just the way she won, I came in looking to pot her, and I'm not with her, but I'm definitely not as against her as what I was.
I suppose you can say as well in that inner All-Star Mile run and even Doncaster run, she did have legitimate excuses in both.
Yeah, she might not have won for a while, but she's gone pretty close, so she might not be as gone as what I first thought, because there's still a Group 1 there in New Zealand. She really won arrogantly there, so there's still a bit of life left in Melody Belle from my eyes. We're going to pull up now the Coongy Cup, which was won by Nonconformist. The runner of interest to us here is Harlem. He's in the white and blue hoops with a red cap. Now, Harlem, we talked about 50 stars winning the Australian Cup, which is over the same track and distance as this race. Harlem's actually won it twice in the past, both times at big odds. And this is, despite being a much inferior race, this is actually quite a nice little lead up here from Harlem.
Yeah, I didn't mind this run. He had a big weight, as you can see. He was sort of under pressure a fair way out and sort of kept coming. The horse that beat him, Nonconformist, didn't do much last week, but does have a bit of a rap on him as well. Early in this day, it was sort of a hard day to sort of come wide. A lot of horses were sort of performing up the inside. So, I thought it was a good run. The thing with Harlem is this Mackinnon Stakes has been a target race for him all spring. He's had a fairly light spring compared to a lot of his competitors, really aimed at this race. And as you mentioned, he's won 2 Australian Cups over this track and distance. He's the sort of horse can bob up at big odds. Craig Williams goes on. He draws to sort of pretty much box seat from the inside gate as well, so he's going to get every chance in the run. I just thought if an outsider's going to win this race, if there's going to be an upset, I think it can come from a horse like Harlem, even though he's not a horse I tend to find.
No, he's. I do remember he won his second Australian Cup, and thinking, he's 33. Seems a big price for a horse that won this race last year. Obviously, I wasn't smart enough to follow through and back it, but he's now 9 though. Is it? Do we start to draw a long bow that he won this race a couple of years ago, and well, he might not be the horse that he was?
Yeah. There's every chance he's not the same horse, but it's just the fact that he seems to tick a few boxes on Saturday, and he's big odds. So yeah. I'm not. There's some chance I don't even back the horse, but I just thought, if there's going to be an outsider win the race, I thought Harlem was probably the most likely prospect, and I don't think he's totally hopeless in it on Saturday.
Beautiful. Let's pull up the tips, and thankfully you've come up with something for us here, Balls. You didn't just totally white flag the whole preview show. You look pretty strong on Arcadia Queen.
Yeah, well, I'm not adding much to the show. I've shouldered arms in the Darley Classic and found the favourite for everyone in the Mackinnon. So, some great insight from me. But, I'm very keen on Arcadia Queen. As I said, I thought she'd probably start with a 2 in front of her price. Very keen back on a dry track. And I think, I suppose, Mugatoo getting back on a dry track, Melody Belle on a dry track, is sort of a bit to the detriment of them, whilst it's a big plus for Arcadia Queen. Not concerned about the possible slow tempo in the race, given her running the Caulfield Stakes on dry ground over this distance. So, I'm very keen Arcadia Queen.
There's no point me saying exactly what you've just said there, Balls, but I'm in your corner as well. I thought she'd be 6-4 when I sort of looked at the market, for most of the reasons that you mentioned. I'm a little bit interested in saving on Mugatoo, especially if Arcadia Queen does shorten up, as I expect she probably will. I think that would open the door to a bit of a drift on Mugatoo, and he might be quite cheap to save on him. Even though he's got some little issues at the barrier draw, and maybe back onto a firm track might not be totally ideal for him. I think he was just an excellent run in the Cox Plate, so if he was to get up and beat the mare, I would be pretty dirty if I didn't have something on. So if we get a bit of drift Mugatoo, I'll be looking to save, but I'm with you here on Arcadia Queen. It just looks a beautiful race for her to bounce back from that Cox Plate run. That's our show, Balls. I put you on the spot on Tuesday's show, and you threw a serious suspect who ran third at pretty big odds. Can I twist your arm for something else on the program, given you've turned up and give us a fresh air and a favourite?
Okay. Well, there's a horse that's going around. I think it's in race 3 or 4, Reykjavik, that I've been waiting for since its Turak run. It runs in a 1400 metre race that actually won last year. It's about $10 in the early market, which I think is probably over the odds. It's got 60 kilos. It probably maps to be sort of back on the inside, which might not be the ideal place to be, but it looks sort of sufficient speed in the race that should allow horses to run on. I think he's definitely worth a bet at around that $10 mark. Reykjavik, I think his form, whilst on paper it doesn't look like much, I think he's racing a lot better than it actually looks.
Excellent. That's if you have been watching the review shows we've been doing, you will know that Balls has been following Reykjavik, so it looks like time to strike on Saturday, which I'm glad you had something there, Balls, because that was a question without notice, putting you on the spot. Thanks for everyone for watching again. If you do like the show, like and subscribe. It really helps get the word out and make this worth doing for us. We are going to come back in our usual time spot on Monday night with a review show. We're going to review the whole 4-day carnival. So that should be good balls. You hanging around for that?
We're reviewing every single race?
Every single one.
All right.
They won't all go to air. We might just pick and choose the best ones to go to air. But we'll look at the Cup. We'll look at the Derby. We'll look at the Oaks. We'll look at these two on Saturday as well. And a lot of these races, the horses will go for a spell after these grand finals. So they're not something we'll dive too deep into. But we definitely need to go through the Cup, and hopefully we can find a couple of runners for the back end of the carnival. But as always, Balls, thanks always for your hard work. Thanks to all the viewers for watching. And we will see you. Good luck on Saturday. We'll see you on Monday night's review show. Cheers, Balls.
Thanks, F.